I wrote a poem about roots, about my feeling about roots, which I'd like to read to you. Roots, a flash across the sky, a meteor lighting the earth, maybe for a moment, maybe for a century, maybe a change, maybe not, but a light in the sky, that's for sure. Masses, masses, masses watching, hard hats, baseball hats, derby, no hat. Children, children, people, people, millions, white face, black face, lit in a dark room of flashing images, of life and death, of family and courage and mercy and honor. My skin is white, I felt no shame, no guilt. Many feelings came, pride, jealousy, joy, sorrow. Proud that some of my species can strive and grow, from hell and beyond. Jealous of their courage, joyful of their love, sad of the lies told about me in my life. I knew the man with the white hat with the white suit on the white horse had family, courage, mercy, and honor. Nobody told me the man in the black hat with the black suit on the black horse had family, courage, mercy, and honor. I was lied to, cheated, fool. Now I know better, much more. That's my feeling about roots.
My daughter was just a little baby. My son wasn't even born yet, but she was about 5, and I remember we turned it on the television, and of course when she saw me in the wagon, it was traumatic for her. Mom, what's happening to Mommy? So we quickly took her out of the room. But then we revisited it I'd say about 6 years ago. And it was very interesting because my children, who are not teenagers, they had a lot of questions. And I had to give them a lot of answers. And so that's wonderful because it's that kind of program where parents and children can interact with each other.
I think it's very important for generations to revisit this. I almost think it should be required viewing by schools in terms of history classes because it's poignant and it tells one man's story, which is the best way to tell any story. It's not a general thing. It's a very specific story. And I think it gives us insight into what was done, and it creates a lot of empathy and compassion, which in this day and age we must revisit and rekindle.
The depth of human relationships is what television is all about, good television. And that's what Roots was an extraordinary example of. Humanity. Humanity in people who, 200 years ago in Africa, nobody had bothered to get into their inner feelings, family feelings and things like that. So really, that was the main thing about Roots. Not the authenticity, not the drama, about the humanity.
25 years later, I believe that is still the best material we have that addresses the issue of slavery and slavery in America.
Alex used to say all the time, history has a tendency to be written by the winners. And our story had always been written by people other than us. This was the first time that the history was being told through the eyes of an African who landed on these shores. And that made a huge difference, just in terms of the point of view. This story wasn't being told from the point of view of the white slave-owning plantation holder. It was being told from our point of view, and it made a huge difference. Everybody came to work just ready to throw down every single day.
I'm such an egotist, as I told many people, that when I took this job, I said, well, I'm going to be brave and I'm going to do this job because I'm sure a lot of whites won't take these jobs. I'm going to offer myself up. And my God, whites were tripping over each other to get on board this vehicle. Now that just shows you how full of crap I was. It shows you how actors are. And it shows you what a great vehicle this was. And how eager people are to be involved in a great story. And it succeeded. And it broke open the great secret.
There was just a wonderful, exciting kind of like when you go to New York. There's a rhythm. There's a like somebody's always playing the drums underneath there. There's a feeling of an energy about this project when we were doing it. I don't think any of us imagined at the time that it would be such a blockbuster when it aired, and that it would just absolutely stop this country dead in its tracks.
I just knew it was a good picture. I knew that. I knew that David had just shot it wonderfully. I thought the first script was a good and solid piece of work. I thought the production values were wonderful. Performances were where they all should have been. I just knew it was a very, very good piece of film. I knew it was honest. I knew it was truthful to what Alex had intended to bring forth. And after that, it's a crapshoot. Had it been a terrible, terrible bomb, I wouldn't have one shred less pride in what we did.
I don't think that anyone really thought of how important it was to find out who your ancestors were. And, you know, when you think about it, you realize that the blood that runs through your veins, it didn't just come from your parents. It came from their parents and from their parents' parents. So the lineage that produced us is and was and has always been important, but I don't think that we realized how important it was until Alex Haley wrote the book, Roots.
One of my daughter's classes came down to visit, and it sparked conversation, not just in the family, but also in the classrooms as to what we were doing and what we were involved with. I hope that the viewing of Roots to this day sparks those kinds of conversations, because it helped me and my family, and I think it will help any family in the discussion of the history of the United States, the history of slavery, the history of Africa. I'm sure that it will help if Roots is still the catalyst that can open a lot of those doors.
People were showing their love against the odds, you know, against all the anguish, against being considered undesirable, you know, and unwanted, being plucked away from their roots, so to speak, from their foundation, their background, and still surviving and having the strength or just the raw tenacity to go forward. That to me is awe-inspiring.
Well, 25 years later, it's not so much in my head, it's in my heart. It's very emotional watching this. Not only the memories of working on it, but what it has to say, and it's still relevant. That's what's so wonderful about watching this, is that the message is still a message that needs to be heard today. Because one of my pet peeves is the fact that we still use those old history books, which doesn't tell much about the background from where we came. And I think when children sit in a classroom and they're doing history, we need to know about each other and the contributions that we have made. And we seem, you know, I mean, there's a few people that get mentioned, but the slavery thing is such a big thing, but they need to know that we weren't slaves originally, and all that is missing from the history books. So for me, Roots also represents the history books that we don't have, because it does tell the story about our background that people need to know, and so that we're not treated as second-class citizens.
But he had such a sense of history. He had such a sense of history and wanting to let us know our history and where we came from in this country. And what I loved about Roots, too, is that he didn't start it with here, because this was the horrible part. He started it in Africa, where we're from, when we were kings and queens and people of royalty, you know, and I love that because a lot of people didn't have that understanding about who we were. A lot of people only viewed us as the slaves that we became here in this country. But we have a very rich past, a very rich heritage. And Alex Haley, I think, was wise enough to start it in the country, in the land of our birth, and bring us to here, so that it's almost like you have to understand where somebody has been to see where they've fallen to really appreciate the struggle and the horror that their life becomes.
For me, on a lot of personal levels, I can celebrate the fact that I was part of something that was very, very important in television's history and in the country's history. Unfortunately, the standard of excellence that was raised to such a phenomenal level by the writings of Alex Haley, the works of David Walper, that bar is now descended appreciably. And I think what we see on television and in the motion picture screen is totally reflective of the fact that nobody really cares about the story anymore. It's about the bottom line. That's unfortunate, and maybe we'll have to crash and burn, almost come to a complete halt with this preoccupation with finances before we realize how valuable a tool this can be to help bring people together, to educate literally third world countries which are still living under the oppression that the original Haley's abductees, if you would, lived under. So we've got a long way to go, but this points out how far we can go.
I think that the humanity that this show brought to the world, and the understanding and the compassion that it brought, has been an enormous thing for good. And, you know, I was lucky enough to do the next show, Roots, The Next Generation, and then the show about Alex's grandmother. So, you know, I really feel as if this is my legacy, and I'm proud of it.
At the time, I just didn't know when we were making it how important it was, or it was going to be. You couldn't know that, you know? And as time has gone by, and I see how many people were affected by it, I am, like I said, very grateful and very proud to have been a part of that story, that production. And I think that people like Stan Margulies, people like Alex Haley, Brad Davis, Madge Sinclair, were such examples of grace. And Lord knows we can all use grace.
This is a letter that Stan Margulies, the producer, wrote to me April 21, 1977. Dear Lynn, what the hell kind of a casting director are you? In some Emmy acting categories, we only got 3 of 5 nominations. It sure has taught me a lesson. Sincerely, Stan. Great sense of humor. And aside from all the Emmys, we did receive a special award from the Television Academy for the casting, which I still hold very close to my heart as an important part of my career. So everybody was rewarded, particularly the audience.
For many of us here in the United States, this show gave us the mental and emotional images that no history book could do. And so hats off to the visionaries who did this.
My my first impression of him was what a wonderful, warm-hearted, loving person he was. And I know he had said to me later on that when the success comes so late in life, and maybe it came so late in life for him, he's already grounded. He already knows who he is. So that's why it didn't go to his head and he didn't go crazy. You know, he used to say, I can only sleep in one bed at a time. I can only drive one car at a time. I can only live in one house at a time. And so it didn't change him in the slightest. He treated everybody the same. He loved everybody, no matter what your position were, no matter if you were sweeping up the set or starring in it. You know, he treated everybody with the same respect and love, and that was a real learning lesson, I think, for all of us. He set an example.
Alex was a very sweet and gentle man who smiled when the rough got rougher and never interfered, was there to answer any question at any time, and just a joyous face was, you know, very often you're surrounded by a sea of frowns, but not Alex.
More than anything else, it gave me Alex. It gave me a relationship with a man that has had a profound impact on my life. When we were shooting in Savannah, Alex came to me one afternoon and he said, you know, whether you are aware of it or not, this is an extraordinary time in your life. And I wonder if you've given any thought to bringing your mother here. I was raised in a single-parent household. I was raised by my mother along with my two sisters. And in truth, I actually hadn't, primarily because I couldn't afford it, you know. And Alex knew that when he initiated the conversation. And he said, I think it's really important that your mother be here to witness this and be present for this. And so he sent her a ticket. And he brought my mother to Savannah so she could share in that. That's who Alex was to me. And I miss him so much. I miss him a lot.